Hey, are you a business owner, entrepreneur, or professional? If so, we want you to apply to be a featured guest on our show. My name is Adam Torres, and I host the Mission Matters series of podcasts. I've recorded over 3,000 episodes, and we are just getting started. How do you know if you'd be a good guest to be on the show? Well, only one way to find out, and that's to apply, but I'm going to let you in on a little secret. We want guests that have a story to tell, guests with a brand, a product, or a service that can benefit my audience of listeners. If this sounds like you, go to missionmatters.com and click on Be Our Guest to apply. I'd love to talk to you and get to know more about your story. Again, head on over to missionmatters.com and click on Be Our Guest to apply. All right, now let's get into the show.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another segment on Clubhouse. This is our weekly episode. We put together an event every Thursday at 4 p.m. PST for all the folks in LA, a little bit more later, 7 p.m. EST, right? So for folks on the East Coast, I figure this is a good time post-work to get a chance to relax, learn a little bit. Maybe it could be from a commute from work or just wrapping up the day. And so every week we put together this segment. We always cover a different topic. This week's topic is lessons learned. So it's the most important life lessons that you've learned from your career. It could be from personal life, could be really just an open dialogue. And so what we ultimately want to do is we're going to give everyone a chance to just coordinate an introduction. So briefly share your background story. But before we do that, just for all of the listeners out there, our company is called Mission Matters. We're a multimedia platform focused on the needs of entrepreneurs, business owners, executives. Our mission, in short, is to help amplify stories so that we can inspire and educate future generations. And of course, other entrepreneurs, executives that are in the trenches now, so that we can learn from one another. And so we have published many different books. We have a few different authors with us that we bring on to share their background stories and their highlights for what they're going to be covering. So with that, why don't we have all of our guests to maybe share a brief intro? We'll go top left and then just go circle our way down from there. So Jatman, why don't we start off with you?
Yeah, good evening, good afternoon. Thanks for having me. My name is Jutman. I'm Toronto-based, Canadian through and through, born and raised. I'm an entrepreneur, is really, professionally speaking. I'm a brother, son, boyfriend. I currently have actually, my entire career has been in sort of digital transformation, and specifically more currently in cloud and sort of modern workplace types of applications. So basically all the stuff that enabled millions and billions of people to work from home during the pandemic, I've luckily had a chance to be right in the middle and the heart of. And I'm about to make a transition. So actually moving back into startup life in the next literally few days. So that's pretty exciting. Getting back into building really, really good stuff in the support of people and their skills and their growth in the modern post-COVID economy. So that's me in a nutshell.
Cool. Sharif, do you want to share your intro, please?
Sure. Good afternoon, good evening, everyone. My name is Sharif Al-Mamoon. I'm originally from Bangladesh, moved to the States in my late teens, and now live in the DC metro area. I own an IT strategy consulting practice, started about 15 years ago, and just working on actually starting a podcast named Impact. It's expected to go live in June, along with my first book with the Mission Matters. Right, Chirag? I think it's coming out in June.
That's correct. Yep. End of June is slated.
That's basically it. I am a father. I've been a single father since my 20s. My daughter is actually in my 40s now. My daughter is in college. She's actually she's starting her internship with me this summer. So really looking forward to that dynamics. I would never want to work for my dad, but she wants to, so we'll see how that goes.
Cool. Awesome. Brian, go for it.
So again, hi, everybody. My name is Brian. Like I said, I've been in the startup industry, as you can say, for a good number of years. Brand total, probably I'm covering about 25 years in and out. So I started with a startup. One startup that I worked at actually was sold to Microsoft back in 2008 for $1.2 billion. I wish I could tell you that I got a good cut of that. I did not, but I was part of the transition team, and I was very proud to be part of that. And ever since that happened, I've always been trying to, I've worked in fintech in particular, a lot of AI, and also in the AI space and fin services and fintech, but now with cloud computing, cybersecurity, and Kubernetes. And basically, I've always been somewhat involved in startups, and I've always been involved in certain podcasts and involved with independent publishers, again, like Mission Matters. So for me, I'm just like yourself. I think Chapman, I think you had mentioned, or Sharif, I'm back in the startup, in that space again. I've been working with a lot of other companies. I'm coming back. I'm entering act 2 of my life. So for me, that means transitioning out of traditional corporate America and just with my new partner, with Greenlight Startup, which is our company, we're just basically looking to match up founders with venture capital and angel investors, score the companies, evaluate, and help them find their own individual path. And my goal is just to be there and help them. And by being an author, I thought with Mission Matters, I think that it's made a tremendous difference in my life. And I hope that I'm able to do the same thing for a number of other founders, as well as angel investors who are looking to put their money into unconventional and non-traditional investment and help people like us grow our companies.
Awesome. And last but not least, Erik, go for it.
Hey, good afternoon and good evening. First time speaking at one of these events. I've been away from this for a little while, so I'm really glad that you invited me back. So anyways, a little bit about myself. I started my career by building sensors for drones at U.S. Navy research labs and defense contractors. I then joined a startup company that licensed IP from the Navy, and we built a revolutionary motion sensor that got acquired by Google back in 2015. From there, I transitioned to working at Google X on Project Wing as an avionics lead, then at Tesla, leading the Model 3 software efforts there. I had a team of 300. And most recently, I was at Argo AI doing sensor integration for their robotaxi fleet. I now have my own company, a co-founder of a company called Omnitron Sensors, and a board member of a Japanese robotics company. And we just recently closed a $2.4 million seed round. So really excited about our next chapter. Proud father of 4, and they span all ages. So got my hands full, but love it. Wouldn't have it any other way. That's a little bit about me.
Amazing. Thanks so much for sharing, and quite the journey, and a lot of kids there. So I'm sure COVID's probably been a fun time getting the whole family together, but awesome. Why don't we start off more so on the business side? Because I feel like we could take this conversation a few different ways. So let's just open it up, right? Like maybe why don't we just have you guys maybe just go one by one and just share some of these important life lessons that you've been able to accumulate. And, I guess, for anyone out there that ends up listening to this, what life advice do you have and what lessons have you been able to learn along your growth trajectory? And maybe Chapman, why don't we start off with you? Because I know you're going to need to duck out in a little bit.
Yeah, thanks for that. I think I'd sum it up in a really quick phrase as a question. What if everything you've ever learned, been taught, dare I say, been indoctrinated with was wrong? That's sort of a question that I try to sort of lead life with, right? I think the lesson from there really is that, there's a lot of presuppositions that you're sort of given, whether that be through education, whether that be through churches and religion, whether that be through just family traditions, that aren't always right. I think, looking around this room, I think we've all got sort of heritage from other places and other countries, and we now live in these amazing, not that those countries are any less amazing, but we live in these amazing countries that present a lot of opportunity. And so there's this beautiful balance that I think there is in protecting what we might have from heritage, and then taking advantage of all the opportunity that's in the backyards that we live in now. And so I really, that isn't necessarily just a life and personal question. It can be a business one as well. I think it's one of the things that's really helped me sort of maintain open-mindedness and this sort of innovation culture in my own life and in my roles, which is, what if everything you thought you knew was actually entirely abjectly wrong? And what if you could come at it sort of with the eyes of a tourist and the eyes of a child sort of every single time? And what is the possibility there? I don't know if that's as deep as you want me to go, but that's where I'd probably stop.
Chapman, I'd love to just maybe if you could come up with an example of where you've seen this in your life, where you were like proven wrong on something. It'd be great to kind of get some thoughts there.
Yeah, well, I think really the entrepreneurial journey coming out of business school. So for me, my first company was in digital. I guess we positioned as a digital agency, but we did a lot of stuff. But before getting into before all that, it's really just this notion that born and raised in a city called Ottawa, most people probably don't immediately know that Ottawa is the capital of Canada. Most people think it's Toronto. But being in Ottawa is sort of, you go with the flow there. The flow there is middle manager in the federal government. That's sort of what people do. That's sort of the way you do things. And even when you go to school, that's almost the indoctrination, where it's your primary purpose is ultimately to go get a job. Well, it's not, at least when I went to school, it wasn't often discussed that maybe that's wrong. Like maybe that is actually the wrong way to go build your life, even as a young 20-year-old. Like when I mentor younger people now, it's just like, go do as many things as possible, go say yes to as many things as possible in your early 20s, because that will set you apart 5 and 7 years down the road, 10 years down the road. So that's, I think, maybe a microcosm of an example where it's like, just because conventional wisdom, or at least 15 years ago when I was in school, 10 years ago when I was in school, the expert way was build a good career, work hard. You know, it might have been changing just as I was graduating, but that's the quickest example that comes to mind, Erik, is like, you're sort of groomed to live this life, and you don't actually have to do that.
Cool.
Amazing. I do have some follow-up questions, but I'll get back to you on those. Sharif, how about you?
Sure, thank you. There are definitely several key things that I've learned, and I think it took me a while to really realize the importance of it. And one of them is relationship is key. Relationship communication. Regardless of how good you are in what you do, if people don't like your energy, people will not work with you. It doesn't matter if it's your personal life, it's your business life, whether you're trying to build a business or you're a student at a school. How you deal with people goes a long way. If you are building a business, I've seen this where, I'll give you an example. I partnered with this company almost a decade ago. And the owner of the company and I, since then, we have done, this is our 6th project together in the past decade. And as time goes, our relationship gets stronger. And the more relationship gets stronger, the more trust we have in each other. And the more easily we can actually work together. And I have no problem, reaching out to him openly about asking about something or talking to him about some sort of venture that I'm trying to go into. When you have key relationships like that, I think it can take you a long way. And then if you flip it, I bet you anything, every single of us have been in a situation where we did not handle a specific relationship the right way. And if you look back in your life, I bet you anything, that you probably could have done it or handled it better way. And so that's why I was starting relationship and communication together. Is how you communicate with people, with a personal life, business life, or whatever it is. How you respect relationship, how you build it. It makes your life much easier, because word gets around, especially in the business. If you deal with somebody in the wrong way, whether it's client or those can have implications down the road. If I knew, when I started my business 15 years ago, if I knew this at the depth that I understand now, before when I was starting up, I was thinking, if I reach out to 50 different people, something will come up. But now what I understand is that if I can build 3 different solid relationships, that 3 different relationships can actually help me get to 100 million plus. So I really value that relationship and communication as one of my sort of top lessons that I've learned in my life.
Quick follow-up question. Is there anyone in particular that has influenced you or has been able to support you in this, like when it comes to a relationship like you're talking about?
Absolutely. That's a very good question. I honestly did not have any real good role model growing up. And so one of that reason, I think that when it came to relationship and the importance of it, I didn't understand the importance of it in my early age. I met one of my best friends in my late 20s. And what I understood from that relationship that I had with him is 2 things. One, the way I've known this guy for 15 years. I've done business together. It's a long history. But every time we had conversation about his spouse or his relationship, the respect that he always shown towards his partner when he's talking about it, the talks that we had made me realize sort of at that early age how you really treat your significant other. That's one part. Second, my relationship with him it was always very non-judgmental. We come from different culture, different background, and we have different kind of experiences in dealing with friends and families, the expectations of how we do or not. I feel like a lot of times, even parent-child relationship is very conditional. It's almost like there's a lot of expectation put in it. But any time I've had in my life, any sort of challenges that I was to, I always felt that I had this person on my side who I could reach out to without feeling that I'll be judged for if I'm not doing things perfectly. I was able to go to him, reach out to him openly, and I carried that with me, and I sort of built that same relationship with my daughter. And I think that's probably why, she wants to work with me. That's without me asking for it on any of those non-judgmental relationship. If you can build it with people, I really think that it makes your journey much easier.
Cool. Awesome. No, thank you so much for sharing. Brian, why don't we have you go as well?
Sure. I mean, by the way, this is really great stuff. The thing that stands out in my head, like I said, while I was in between startups and established companies, I've worked for New York City Health and Hospitals, and I kind of stood in as an interim CTO when they were having some transitions and reorganizations. So it was the first time I was ever given that kind of responsibility. Again, it was a quasi-government New York City Health and Hospitals. They managed 23 long-term care and acute care, facilities and 80 community clinics at the corporate level. It's, from the technology side, it was just a matter of understanding all their needs and compiling them together and working with the CIO and a ton of other people and actual doctors who who understand medicine. So it was a lot going on, a lot of different political games, so much. Again, I felt like I was a fish out of water, that I was really in a whole different situation, and I wasn't sure how to be successful and how to move forward and how to deal with the internal challenges, the bureaucracy and all these things. And there was one person in particular who I ran into. He actually CIO. He's one of the people who decided to bring me in. And he had this meeting, and I remember the advice that he gave us. It was very blunt, but it was very exact. He looked at all of us, but I remember him looking at me in particular. And he said, whenever there's something that we need to have done, there basically, and I'm paraphrasing, but he said, what you need to ask yourself is, are you managing or are you leading? Because it's not the same thing. And the example, and again, I'm paraphrasing, but he said, if you are telling your direct reports and colleagues what they need to do and then tracking when it's done, that's a manager. And there's nothing wrong with that. And that's needed in any business, whether it's a startup of 2 people or whether it's a multinational conglomerate. But if you're a leader, you don't tell anyone what to do. A leader asks their people, their colleagues, what do you need so that you can do what we need to succeed? And how can I, as a person in a particular role, help you do that? And if anything, it's not a matter of the leader tracking their work, but it's more of the people who follow them, the people who are actually getting the work done, tracking what they need from the leader to enable them to move forward, to reach milestones and to move forward. When I heard that, and again, this is back in like 12, I think it was 2012, 2013, when I heard this from my CIO, his name was Sal, and I'll never forget, I just never forget it because it really, to this day, it stuck with me, the idea that if I'm telling you what to do, I've already demoted myself from a leader to a manager. And unfortunately, I think we can all relate to this. Any of us who's worked in corporate America, we have at times been managers and maybe not led, and we have all worked for managers who did not lead. And every day I wake up, I try to remind myself, am I tracking people's work, or am I asking them what they need so they can be successful? Because chances are, if they're really knowledgeable about their space, that they're truly domain experts, what do I know that they don't already know? Why would I be telling them or advising them what to do? If anything, they should be advising me, and then we should be having a very different kind of conversation. It should be a conversation of enablement. And then the most that I would do is hold them accountable but the idea is that it should be a bottom up. A leader should always lead from the bottom up. The bottom should tell the leader what they need. The leader should set the tone to further that enablement, and also to try to find other people who understand that frame of mind so they can lead also and not simply manage. I think we have too many managers in the corporate America, way too many managers and far too few leaders. So that was the advice I had, and it stuck with me to this day.
Amazing. And then last but not least, Erik, would love to hear yours as well.
I'm going to go in a slightly different direction, more technically focused, because that actually was one thing that really impacted my career in approaching problems in general. My first program was developing a radar system, and one thing that radar is really good at is seeing moving objects, but struggles seeing static objects. So you literally look at the data, the image that comes back, and a parked car, you have a hard time distinguishing from the background, but a car that was moving popped right out. So like, what the heck's going on? And I had a great mentor at the time. He's like, it pointed out to me an article. He already had the answer, right? But it's not about giving me the answer. It's about me kind of realizing it, and it really stuck to me. He pointed out to this article about how in nature, our eyes, in fact, most mammals do this, our eyes dither. So they vibrate just a little in the sockets to help extract features in static objects. Implemented that feature in the radar system, and sure enough, you look at the image before and after of these cars that were moving, and sure enough, they popped right out. What that taught me was to look at nature for solutions, especially when it comes to innovation. So I applied that throughout my career in developing problems and approaching problems, coming up with solutions. I go, well, how do we do it? And there's just so much we don't know about how nature has solved these problems that we're dealing with today, that it just opens up a whole world of opportunities for invention and innovation that's exciting to be at the forefront of. But it kind of goes against this like first principles thinking. It's like something that I think you dropped off earlier, what you were saying about really questioning every assumption that you're making and going back to like, what is it that we're fundamentally trying to do, and what solutions has nature solved? So I've been applying that principle to a lot of the technical development that I've done throughout my career. It has been really fruitful for me. That's me kind of not quite business specific, but more on what has helped me in my career in terms of a very valuable lesson.
I love that, right? Because it's coming from more of like I guess it's more like skill or like learned skill set. Is there anyone and this is really the three of you, and I think Sharif, you kind of hinted at this, but is there anyone that has influenced you or helped you really, like, even from some of the things that you guys have shared, Brian and Erik, that resonate? Or is there someone that like showed you or gave you some guidance or direction, like even I think you both come from the corporate world, right? Started off there and then ventured off and now have launched your own businesses. But I guess earlier on in your career, is there anyone that's influenced you or assisted you along the way? And I think you guys have worked at different organizations, so I guess maybe throughout your career.
I can take a quick stab at this. And Brian, what you brought up made me think of one of my first great managers I had. He definitely stood out early on, and not the same guy, different guy. But I asked him later on, after we kind of completed this program and project, I asked him if he would be a mentor of mine. And then I also asked him, like, tell me about your management style. Tell me about what has influenced you in terms of doing and leading the way you lead. And he pointed out to this book called a short book, maybe a couple hundred pages. It's called The Servant Leadership. But it really talks about this bottoms up management style and enabling the team and providing the team with the tools that they need to get their job done, and really focusing on sharing the vision and aligning on the vision, and then things fall in place. And sure enough, seeing that in action is something that I've tried to apply as a leader and use that book as a canon for how I approach management.
Cool. Love that. How about you, Brian?
The person that comes to my mind other than Sal, who I think he's probably getting ready to retire now. I think he's in his 60s, so I think he's had it. He's one of the person who kind of kicks down the door. Every company comes in as an executive, he knows he's got to like light a fire under people a little bit, and that's his style. That's not so much what I see now, from younger managers or leaders, but that was his style of like kind of shake things up. But the person who probably influenced me the most, his name is Luke Asco. He started me in startups. This is going back into as far back as really the late 80s. So I'm dating myself, and I hate doing that. But I guess I just did it. I just dated myself. So, I mean, I was doing an internship, like little sales, like computer sales and stuff. And that was the nature of his company. But the thing about Lou is that he was very much a bottom up, but he was very much I think it was Sharif. I think you had mentioned the idea of relationships, and he procured relationships. And it's interesting what he did, because he was really into Dungeons and Dragons and role playing on the side. But I noticed that in the workplace, that same kind of collegial attitude, it's almost as if in some ways in the office when I was there, that he kind of met, and this is going back to the 90s when we're trying to build up a systems integration firm. So we're competing against, like the top tier companies, the McKinsey companies and EDS, Ross Perot's company at the time. So those are the kind of companies that we were competing for bids for, government jobs and things like that. New York City Health, Department of Environmental Protection and other quasi-government agencies. And sometimes we would win a piece of the business, and one of the things I think that worked is because he treated it as a quest. Very similar. If you've ever played role-playing games, or if you have any affinity for it, then you probably understand what I mean. Each person has a role. Each person has a strength. You play off your strength. There's an element of capability, and there's also an element of luck. No matter how good you are, there's always a combination of both. You want to rely more on the skill than luck, but you can't count luck out either. And he seemed to do that. Every time we would go into a new contract, a new opportunity, new challenges, very, very small margin. So any mistake, we just lost the profit on that deal. So, and that was the challenge we had going into all these, rolling out these, these new environments and networks. But I really appreciated the fact that he had that attitude of, he understood my particular strengths, as well as the part that I wasn't as strong as. I didn't have as much technical skill as others. I wasn't highly analytical as other people were, but I was more personable. So he would use me for the positioning, more for like the liaison. So if I'm working with a procurement manager on the other side of a company, he figured out how to leverage me for that. And Lou was always very, and vice versa for the hardcore technical engineer or data architect. That's not the person he would choose to be in front of the client to a high degree, because he understood I'm not leveraging their strength. They really want to be in a dark room with people of like-minded individuals. They want to be able to argue back and forth, heated debate. Not a good thing when you're trying to sell to a client, but really good when you're trying to troubleshoot, when you're trying to break ground, when you're trying to figure, when you're trying to work with a difficult vendor, a third-party vendor, to get them on the same page. And that's how he managed, or I should say, that's how he led the company at the time. That's how he helped, mentor me. I never really asked him to be my mentor, but I just kind of fell into that role, and it was really the same thing. It was almost like an apprenticeship journeyman kind of thing. But I love the fact that he treated all of us as if we were part of some quest, each of us with different skills and talents. And instead of telling us what to do, he knew basically what we were good at, and all he did was position us in such a way that we would naturally go towards the thing that we were better at. If I was better at writing, I would craft the proposal. I would revise the proposal. Other people were much better at doing the numbers, running the numbers. They wound up getting more involved in the quotations, requests for quotations. Like I was saying before, the engineers were much better at just analyzing, problem solving, and coming up with an innovative solution with a great deal of heated debate, And he figured out how to compartmentalize each part of us, or each one of us, and then at the same time bring us back together so each one of us understood and respected each other. And to the best of my ability, I'm trying to bring that out into what I do right now with Greenlight Startup, as well as any other thing that I ever get involved in.
I love that. And so curious about this, because, you guys both come from, and I think, Sharif, you've had a little bit of experience in the corporate world, right? Like making that transition from the corporate world to even starting your own endeavor, I guess. What are some things that you've learned, just even whether it's through that transition or from the corporate world versus, what you're doing as like a leader, right? And I think this has to go with that whole leader versus manager aspect that, that key that you're talking about, right, Brian? I guess, what is that difference maybe? And maybe what were some things you learned there versus now, since all three of you are running your own businesses now?
I can take an initial stab at it. I don't think I fit in corporate. Even early on, I couldn't stay on a project for more than few months to maybe a year or two before I had to move on to something else. The idea of staying doing one thing in my career and focusing on that terrified me. So that was something that scared me about staying in the corporate world. And I kind of jumped at the opportunity headfirst in the startup as it became an opportunity. So that's been my experience. It's just kind of like, and I looked for mentors when I was in corporate, and I was like, I don't want to do that when I grow up. Was some of the things that I kept coming as a common theme in my development. Some of these really bright guys, engineering fellows. I was like, I'd meet with them and try to see, like, is that what I want to be when I grow up? I guess maybe that would be a question I would ask myself in corporate if I was evaluating corporate. It's like, go to the executive level role that you think you want, or probably questions. And that's what I asked myself to realize that I didn't fit in. But I did it for a while because, I have to make money. So it wasn't until I had this opportunity. And then now the startup bug. Oh, I love startups. It's a lot of fun. The responsibility, the ownership, the stress, the payoff is beneficial, not monetarily. It's the ownership of and having your own dream come to reality, realizing that is so worth it for me.
I'll jump in right after Erik.
Yeah, go ahead.
I've gotten lucky in a way, because I started my corporate career, worked for Boeing, all the big four for some time, and then because of life challenges, I really got consulting. It was not really a planned effort. Got into consulting and then realized that, I could do independent consulting myself instead of working through other people. But I've gotten to a point where I really wanted to make a decision. Do I want to really build up a business, or do I want to go back into corporate culture? And so I took some time to really make that judgment call. So what I did was I started to apply for full-time positions to see where I can land. And at that time, I was really trying to make that call one way or another. So my option was the options was I got accepted to a bunch of different schools to do global executive MBA, and Columbia University offered me to join them as executive director of finance. And this was about 15 years ago, so I'm still in my 30s. So I'm thinking in my head that that's a great path to take. If I take that role, and if I start my global executive MBA program, within a few years, I really positioned myself in a way that I could almost join anywhere as a VP in my 40s. That's kind of how I was thinking. But at the same time, I was like, well, what's going to happen in my 50s and 60s? Am I going to look back in my life and want to actually give 100% effort into building a business? And will that be too late by then? So I gave myself 5 years that I'm going to give my 100% in building a business. I will take every kind of risk that I need to take for 5 years. But at the end of the 5 years, if I am not satisfied with where I am, I'm going to go back to the other route. And I think one of the things that helped me tremendously, a lot of people had mentors, a lot of people had people to guide them. But for me, it's kind of like my life has been my playground. I've gone through a lot of challenges in my early days that sort of made me, it's not to really brag about myself or anything, but it's really made me very resilient about anything. Living home at 16, then moving to the States by myself in my 20s, going through marriage, divorce, and raising a child as a single parent in my 20s, nothing else really felt challenging to me. So it really made me very strong when it came to taking risks, because nothing else felt risky enough for me. So in that period of time, I just told myself that, I'm going to give myself 100% for 5 years. If I fail, I know that I've done it. That's not for me. Luckily, by the time I was getting close to my 5th year, I won't say lucky, getting close to my 5th year, everything just sunk, basically. But the thing is, throughout that process, I was kind of thinking about it. It's like, okay, maybe it's time for me to just walk away from it. Maybe this is not for me. But amazingly, throughout that process, I really found acceptance. Like a lot of the lessons learned that I've gone through and all that stuff, we were talking about this before, right? One of the things I realized is that you can plan your life, you can do everything you want, but at the same time, you really have to learn to accept what it is and sort of be happy with and have gratitude in everyday life. And believe that whatever happens in your life, the universe has a better plan for you somehow. So throughout that process, I actually was able to sort of come to a point when everything was kind of hitting rock bottom. I was able to get to a very, it's also like Jesus take the will surrender, basically, place. And suddenly since then, things started to turn around. So within that, my last 5 years stretch that I gave myself, when I told myself, I'll give me 100% 5 years, I was coming to a point where I said, okay, I think I've given myself 5 years. I'm good. I can go back to sort of regular career. I knew that that was not where my heart was, but I kind of took it as that was my sign to exit, and I've done the test. Let me go back to that 5 years ago and start over, basically in the different route. But fortunately, things started to turn around since then, and I haven't looked back ever since. So I really had a chance to both experience the corporate world, all different challenges and life lessons, but at the same time, in the corporate world, in the business world, last 10 years, there has been challenges, but it's been very satisfying journey, because it's like you are doing your own thing, building your own way in your own schedule. I really cannot ask for anything differently, to be honest.
Go for it, Brian.
So the question was again,
it
happens to me sometimes.
No worries. I think the short summary of this is really, there's different lessons that I'm sure you would probably tell yourself in the corporate world versus the, becoming an entrepreneur and living that entrepreneurial life. I'm sure there's different things that you've learned, through that process. I guess if you can maybe share some insights in regards to that.
There's there's one, and this might be this. I hope this is useful. This kind of comes back from one of my earliest mentors, Lou. The difficulty I've always had is I'm very anti-confrontational. So when building relationships, it's always great when they like you, but unfortunately, that's not how life is, right? We have to work with people, including clients and customers, who don't always have the best outward personality, and sometimes things can get very difficult and contentious. And I tend to shy away from that sort of thing. That's just me. But being a leader means being able to deal with that as well. And I always struggle with that. Earlier on, I've gotten better with it as I've gotten older. But the reason I've gotten better is because Lou told me something. You may be familiar with the Briggs-Meyer personality assessment and skill aptitudes. They have something like 21 or 24 different ways of describing how a person interacts with other people. And he said, you know what, that's great, and it's wonderful, that all that research. I'll make it really simple so that when you're on the phone with someone, you're not going to be able to run an assessment on them and give them a battery of tests to figure out what kind of person are they based upon their responses. You're not going to have that chance when you're talking to a client the first time, or if you're on a job interview. So how do you deal with people? And he says, think of this as not a personality assessment, but of a community. He basically came up with a quadrant of communication style. And he says, think animals. For him, it works. For some, they may think it's a little silly, but it works. It stands out in my mind. He says, think of everyone you meet as having a communication style of either a lion, wolf, deer, or turtle. And this is the simplest way that I can explain it, and I'll be brief. Think of the lion as this is the person who's the directive. They work well with a pack or pride, but they're also fine on their own. They will tell you what their vision is, and they expect you to figure it out. If you were to go to the way you would test if a person's a lion type of communicator, if you ask them out to lunch, not only would they tell you what they want, they would also already tell you what restaurants are best and when the best time is to go. Because that's the directive that they typically, for them, contention, any kind of animosity, that's fine. If it gets them ultimately what they want. The wolf is more group-oriented, hence the term, so you think of the wolf pack. I tend to fall into this group. We communicate collegially. No one person wants to be the alpha all the time. You do typically need at least one, but the idea is that we do it for the group. We work better together than we do apart. If you ask a wolf to lunch, the litmus test is you're going to get a lot of information from a lot of different people, and everybody wants to make sure that, that the majority, that we have consensus on that, which is great for things like project teams. A lot of project teams where they have a very tight-knit group, that would probably be more of a wolf style of communication. Then the last two, the deer, this is someone who, again, tends to be in groups, but now we start to shift into more of an apprehension, more risk-averse part of the quadrant. The deer is much more concerned with how will the lion communicator or the wolf communicators, how can I make everybody happy? How can I appease them? Which is virtually impossible if you've ever worked in any workplace to get everyone on the same page. So the deer is quick, whereas the wolf will come together for consensus, the deer wants total unanimous decisions. So already you see the difficulty regarding and how that, it's not that it's right or wrong, but it's like, but I've noticed this sometimes, and I've seen and I've met people who kind of play into that part where it's more the deer. When animosity comes, where the lion communicator brings it on, has the attitude of bring it on, the deer is ready to go. They're out of the meeting, they're gone, good luck finding them. If you ever ask them to lunch, the deer communicator is like, I don't know, what do you want to have for lunch? I'm not, whatever you want is fine with me. So that's more of like the passive kind of approach. And then finally, and this is the one which I always get a kick out of, the turtle. The turtle is also more of, I operate singularly. Doesn't have to be, a group. I can work well. They typically are the most knowledgeable person in the group, but also they can typically be the more challenging to work with. They also deal well with animosity. The difference is they're not focused on division. They're focused on laser beam, get to the heart and the root cause of every problem. If you ask a turtle to lunch, the litmus test is good luck. Whatever you suggest, no. They'll have a number of reasons why not, because they are the most risk averse, whereas the lion communicator is the least. So I basically gave you pretty much, that was the MO that my old mentor used to go through. So think of this, the lion, wolf, deer, turtle, any person you meet, they said, you can basically categorize their communication style and their management style in one of those four quadrants. And I tell you, I think I have to publish this, because I asked him, do you want to publish this in a book or something? And he says, no, you know what, Brian, take it. It's yours. So there you go, Chirag. I don't know. Maybe you have an idea for the next Mission Matters thing. I don't know.
I feel like you have an NFT concept right there that you might be able to just drop with you said lion, deer, turtle, and I'm missing one. But real quick, there we go. Before I dive in further, we just had Dr. Aries join us. Dr. Aries, why don't we start off with maybe like a quick 30-second, 1-minute intro, and then maybe we could just have you start the prompt with maybe what do you feel is like your most important life lesson that you've learned?
Sure. First of all, hello, everyone. I apologize for my tardiness. I've been literally multitasking, and I'm literally on a call now observing a panel, the story related to Ida B. Wells on WTTW. So I'm really excited to be here today to join you all. A quick overview of my background. I am an educator, a coach, a talent strategist. Some would say a practitioner, scholar, a business education unicorn. I work in the education and also the business space. My business is called Workforce EQI, and it helps companies to address issues and emotions in the workplace. And so right now I'm doing a lot of work in that space. Equally, my passion is in the area of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. So a lot of my work is there as well. Coupled with that, I am an adjunct business professor and executive in residence at Dominican University. And a recent, as of probably the last few months or so, I also write a publication, or an article, I should say, for the AWBC, which is an African American business magazine called the Dr. Aries Report, and it features all issues related to women. So the question, Chirag, is life lessons, right? Is that what you want me to respond to?
Correct.
All right. Life lessons. I would say probably one of the biggest lessons that I've learned is about the importance of creating and maintaining relationships and how to go about doing that. And so making sure that those relationships are sticky and making sure that you are building them genuinely and authentically and not just based on the surface. And I say that because I've been able to do that because of conversations and relationships that have been put in front of me where they've taught me the importance and the know-how. I still have the same best friends since third grade, all the way up to current day. I still have the same relationships with friends from college and throughout. And I think that ability is undervalued, and I think right now is probably extremely valued because of our current climate. The ability to have a lot of these power or soft skills are amplified. They were not as amplified before. It was go in, do the work, be more of a tactical around the approach. And now it's how can I have the agility, the ability to build connections, the communication, the collaboration, all the, again, soft skills that are undervalued. So that's what I would say is one of my biggest life lessons is the importance of relationship building and making sure those relationships are sticky.
Yeah, I'm actually curious because I know we've been talking a lot about the business side of things. On the personal side of things, right? Whether it's family or whether it's close friends, and I think there's some overlap, right, in what Dr. Aries just mentioned, even a little bit what Sharif mentioned. But I think in like raising a family with kids, or even thinking of lessons that you guys have learned there.
I think the philosophy is the same, right? Communication is very important. Relationships goes a long way. And, whether it's business relationship or personal relationship, I think it's fairly similar concept. And you also have to respect you, especially when you're raising your kids. It's more important that they know that they have a base, they have a home to come to. And by home, I don't mean just a house. It's a person that they can count on, because there are so many things that, so many different kind of environments and people kids can be associated to. And as they grow older, I remember when my daughter was starting college, I had to sit down, talk with her, and I asked her if she wanted to try drinks. She's like, no, I don't know, I'm not there yet. But later on, I had her try different drinks with me and stuff, because I know that when she goes to college, she will. But I'd rather her try it with me so she knows her balance, right? So having just an example, personal example, but having that openness, open communication goes a long way in every kind of relationship, especially when you are raising your kids. If they know that they can come home to you regardless of what it is, and one of the things I've always kind of took it very personally especially in my business life, is that you can plan for everything in your life. You can plan it, you can execute it, you can try to make it perfect. But if universe has a different plan for you, sometimes that's what's going to happen. But so if you tied to your outcome, chances are you're going to be disappointed. So if you have the openness as I'm going to try my best, give it 100%, but at the same time, even if result is a little bit different, I'm going to accept it as a blessing. If you see it that way, if your relationships are kind of treated that way too, I think personal life or business life, you'll be just fine. That's been my philosophy, and it's been working fairly well, I guess.
Sharif, I wholeheartedly agree. It reminds me of a book I read a long time ago when I had my daughter, my first daughter. It's called Strong Father, Strong Daughter. And it really sums up to this. Be the father, be the husband that you want your daughter to marry or to be with, or the person that you want her to be with. And that kind of went beyond in terms of like integrity. And, I do my best to live to the standards that I hold myself to. And I remember being a kid and seeing my parents fight and seeing you're just watching, you're seeing everything. It really doesn't matter what's coming out of our mouth. What matters is our actions and how we treat each other. And that's been really valuable for me to experience in one sense as a child, in terms of like, am I doing something that I would want my daughter's future husband to be doing around her? And that like really like just sobers me up.
It changes your perspective, right?
For sure. Yeah.
That way, right? It's
Yeah.
very different. Yeah.
Yeah. So it really taught me to value integrity because they're always watching. I remember watching as a kid. So anyways.
Cool. Love that. I know usually we end up capping off these conversations at around an hour, but I feel like you guys had a couple of questions for each other, or I guess any few comments. I know Dr. Aries just joined us recently, so I guess, but anyway, I guess you guys have any questions or anything else that you guys would want to learn or impart?
Something actually, it is funny because I just saw Dr. Aries, this is kind of for you, but it could be for Erik and Sharif as well too. But with all the discussion about diversity, inclusion, and I know a number of people. My brother is also my brother Todd. Also, he worked for Amazon as a chief of diversity inclusion there, and for hiring more people of color in STEM, and STEM related jobs and things like that. The biggest concern I have is, as someone who grew up in the 1970s, again, I'm dating myself again, but where that was when affirmative action things first came out, and corporate America was trying to turn the page on a somewhat darker past, and they were trying to move forward. Corporate America wanted to showcase diversity for the first time in a very positive light. And then the 80s happened, the 90s. I'm not sure what happened there, but you kind of fell through, whatever, ran off the rails. I wanted to ask you, if you could, what are your feelings on the current climate of D&I that you're seeing in schools and in corporate America? And the other part of it is, do you feel like it's going to last, or are we in danger of having this latest iteration be just another page, and eventually America turns that page to a different chapter, and we go back to the way things were?
That's a big question, Brian. And I think if you had caught me prior to the documentary that I just heard of Ida B. Wells, I may have had a different comment, because I guess my initial response is we have a long way to go. I think that if we all put in the work, and again, I think this work is not exclusive to people who are impacted by the work or the need. And I think that is the misnomer that comes along with the DEIB space, that it is the work of those that are underrepresented or marginalized. It's not. Typically, the biggest impact comes from those that don't represent the groups that are being serviced or need to have the service done. So just even in reflection, again, from my most recent work, I think if you change the channel where you focus more on those who can impact decisions that impact the bottom line, you have more of a long-standing outcome. If you're not doing that, if you can at least have a culture shift where it is embedded, it's not just, this is the chief diversity officer who does that work. Or we have ERGs to support those people, but it is a part of the culture. Like, for example, one of the coaching organizations that I work for is called Better Up. And at Better Up, one of the reasons that I am so entrenched and involved in all things that they do is because I believe in their mission, and it comes from the top down. Their CEOs and founders don't believe, and I can't quote them on this, but from my perspective, they don't believe that the need is just from their employees, but they have to be the ones that lead by example. So they brought me in to do a couple of workshops for their entire company, but it was from their directive, and they were involved in the content design, et cetera. So are we where we should be? No. When I hear stories of what I just, again, heard on this webinar, where the same things happened in, I don't even know what year that was, maybe like 1960s, 50s, whatever it was, that are still happening 2021, we have a long way to go. So we have to hold each other accountable. And then finally, I'll say we have to attach it to the bottom line. And people don't care unless they care.
Cool. Love that. No, I definitely feel it that we've got a little while to go too. But I think, as long as we have folks like Dr. Aries and a bunch of other folks, like even you, Brian, I think you're doing a lot when it comes to diversity, equity, right? And getting board members assigned and some of the other projects that you're working on. I feel like we can make some strides there. Are there any other final comments or questions that you guys all have?
Since I was last speaking, I'll just end with kind of going back to the most important life lesson learned. Think about your value proposition, your statement of intent. That is something that you're going to use as the thread of your life. What do you want to be known for? What are those dots in between the beginning and end of the line? And so that's what I would offer, is us to just take moments of introspection and reflection and how we're going to live up to the dots in between our lines.
Love that. I think mine, and this was one quick one, by the way, is I had Martin email me. He was supposed to join us on this call, but he couldn't make it. But his lesson in short is to not worry about failure, because it's more so like the fear of failures for his thing. And for him, he believes that fear really means false evidence appearing real. His key lesson is no stress, no fear, and failure is just a lesson. Learn from it and don't make the same mistake twice, and then just keep moving on. Mine, I think when I was just getting out of college, I heard this quote. I don't even remember who said it anymore, but it just kind of stuck along. It's in short for me, it's, if your life were a movie, would you watch it, right? And for me, that's kind of how I make a lot of my decisions. And I wasn't really until COVID hit that I realized I used to make a lot of decisions, I think, more logically and based off of like, hey, is this going to propel the career? Is this going to propel the business? Is this going to make more money? Does this make more sense for partnerships? I've kind of changed that focus as of this. I want to say I would say maybe started this year, end of last year. It's, does this make me happy? And am I going to be happier doing this over and over again? Following this mantra, this model, whatever it is that we're working on. And anyway, that would be like my final lesson that I would impart. So just my final. Cool. With that, any other final comments? Or I guess our next week's event, just so you guys know, is coming up May 27th. And that one is really more focused on your role model and selecting your role models and mentors, and how do you seek them out and how do you find them and what do you learn from them? So that's next week's episode, again, 4 p.m. PST, Thursday the 27th. But I guess before we say our final goodbyes, any other last comments?
This is Brian. The only other thing I just want to say, Dr. Aries, is that was Erik that you mentioned the thing about that dot, because that's exactly what a really close friend of the family, when they passed away, that was what the minister had said. It's as if you were there. This is like years ago. He said, like, you've got a beginning date on that tombstone and an end date. And then there's a dash in the middle. Instead of dot, he said dash in the middle. And that dash is the entirety of everything that has ever been important to you, and everyone who's ever loved you is in that dash. So whatever you do, live in that space and make that, because the other two dates, you don't have total control over those first two dates, but everything in between is 100% under your power. So I just had to end with that one. I think it's a beautiful thought.
I love it. Awesome. Definitely appreciate that. Cool. Well, with that, thanks for joining us, everyone, and looking forward to seeing all of you guys next week. Thanks again. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody.